This is another sniper. I've shown you a lot of personal personal security detail snipers, counter snipers. This is someone who's on the team that holds the world record. They shot someone from 3 kilometers away. So I just want to give a few minutes of airtime to someone who has relevant experience on the situation, might have some observations we can all learn from. And this is coming from a podcast called True North. Never saw it before, but YouTube, the algorithm, it saw what I was interested in, and it's like, oh, you should see what this guy has to say on it. So we'll go forth, and then we'll come back to round out the show and land on the tarmac. But let's first get this on the record. Let's go to True North.
We are now joined by Dallas Alexander, a former Tier 1 Special Forces sniper in the Canadian military, who has protected VIPs, including the Canadian Prime Minister, as a sniper detail. In 2017, Alexander and his 4-man sniper team set the world record for the longest confirmed kill in history at over 3.5 kilometers when they took out an ISIS fighter in Iraq. Along with that, Dallas is also a country musician. So there's perhaps no better subject matter expert to walk us through the shocking events that we saw on the weekend at the Trump rally in Pennsylvania than you, Dallas. So thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we get into it, I want to play a short clip for the audience of your social media post yesterday, breaking down your reaction to the shooting at the Trump rally.
Just if you don't know me or are new to this page, I spent just about 17 years in the military, just about 14 of which were at Tier 1 Special Operations unit called JTF-2. Our sniper team has the world record for the longest confirmed sniper kill. And a huge part of our job while I was there and while I was a sniper was doing close protection for VIPs up to and including the Prime Minister when he would go to dangerous countries like Iraq or Afghanistan. We would be in charge of that security. So I'm very familiar with the layout of these types of things and what the jobs should be. And yesterday, what happened, I have no doubts in my mind that the shooter had help from somewhere within an agency, an organization, or the government. The second I saw that aerial photo of what they were saying happened, it immediately made no sense to me. You cannot, in broad daylight, get onto a rooftop within, it looked like maybe a couple hundred yards, if that. You can't get into that position with a gun when there's a president speaking. It cannot be done.
So, Dallas, in that clip, you mentioned that you believe the shooter must have had help from inside, some inside help, before he was able to take the shot. Explain to us why you feel that way.
So this exact scenario is essentially, it was a big part of my job for a long time. And I got to work at the kind of the top level of it. To me, I immediately, when that aerial, so I was out at a restaurant, I just saw it come up on a TV that was the aerial picture of the rally site. And they started labeling things. And as soon as they said that the shooter was on a rooftop 130 yards from Donald Trump, my immediate thought and reaction was, then he had help to get there. It's the most obvious place. It should have been the number one priority. It doesn't make any sense. And it would have just took someone sitting. It didn't even have to be a sniper on the roof there. Just someone at the base of the building. So random people couldn't climb on a ladder and get a vantage point over top of Donald Trump. None of it makes any sense. I think that the events after the shots fired, there's a lot of talk about confusion, and one of the snipers had someone in their sights and couldn't get permission to shoot, and all the chaos. Some of that stuff, if you're telling me it's incompetency, I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Like there's been, when things get crazy, communications get crazy, but I don't buy incompetence where they just totally forgot to have someone securing that one building, or, you know, the route to get to the backside of that building that sloped away, so he had a covered approach. None of it makes any sense.
So take us through what would be going through your mind and your team's mind if you were in that position. Let's say you were involved in the sniper detail, and there's a video, it appears, of a Secret Service sniper noticing the shooter before he's able to engage the shooter. What is the process from when somebody sees a threat like that and what's the process from when they see the threat to when they can execute the threat and take care of that threat? How does that all go down?
Yeah, so in like a physical sense of what you're doing, you know, you're on your site, you're making sure you have the right elevation on, you're double checking that, your ballistics, you're making sure the wind call that you made is still the wind call that's holding, dealing with a different wind call. And you're making sure your position's good to go, because that is when, you know, all your senses are firing. That's where all the training's for, is when you see another sniper stalking into a position to try and get a shooting vantage point. So as soon as you can clearly identify there's a rifle, you take the shot. Like, now that is sniping in a context of ROEs, and for me that's overseas. So in this particular case, the ROE, like the rules of engagement for Secret Service, I don't know what they are. I've spoken to people who have told me that Secret Service has ROE that says if there's a sniper, you're allowed to shoot him, which makes perfect sense. But I mean, I'm just kind of speculating on the rules of engagement side, because I don't know if he was allowed, or if he had to wait for permission, or if he was just checking in. I don't know any of those details.
In your experience, when you've done protective detail for VIPs, how wide of a perimeter do you lock down? And what do the procedures look like in the lead up to securing an area where someone like a prime minister would be speaking?
Yeah, so mine were more on the move in different countries when they're visiting, because our unit doesn't do protection for the prime minister while he's in Canada.
Right.
But even on the move, it's thorough. If he's stopping to be in a place like that, the one building where the shooter was would be the first thing we go to. And we would have eyes locked on it, guns on it the whole time, if we didn't have somebody on it also. I mean, the water tower that was in that photo would also be an area of concern, but like you start close and you go far. And based on resources, you go as far as you can, or it makes sense, you know. When you're planning something like that, and especially something, you know, in one spot, it's not a big moving thing, he's not touring a city or whatever, you're out there. I don't know what their SOP is again, but it's days before. You're making sure, like, because when there's a figure that's that important, you know, you have to make sure that like the buildings aren't rigged to blow up, for instance. Like, there's just so many things to think about. Now that's more of an overseas context also, but there's security sweeps that start and have to happen. And for the most immediate threat to not be taken care of, it doesn't make any sense.
And when you look at that aerial photo, as someone who was in that business, is there anything else that you think would be catching the eye of snipers on detail? Is there any other structure in that area that you think would be more important for them than the one place where the shooter was? Because as you said, and from my own common sense tells me, that location is the only location to be watching for.
Yeah, well, it's at least the primary one. You know what I mean? Like, I did see a water tower in the back, and as a cliche sniper, sniper in the tower, you'd probably want to keep an eye on it. But the primary one is the one that's 130 yards away. Like, you can just zero your rifle at that range. You don't even have to make a complicated shot. It's just so obvious. Children who play Call of Duty would tell you that. Fortnite, they would tell you that. People that paintball would tell you that. And that area was covered in tactical professionals. Level of competency, I don't know, but still tactical professionals that have done courses and training and secure. It's the most obvious place.
And based off of what you know from the shot, so it's about 130, 150 yards, if I'm not mistaken. what's the likelihood of a total amateur making that shot with a scope if he had a scope?
Yeah, see, I don't know the optic that the shooter had on his gun. I haven't seen a picture of that yet, so that changes a lot.
Right.
Now, if you have a scope, you don't need much gun training to make a shot at 130 yards. I mean, you don't really need any. I mean, provided you know how to put the bullets in the gun. It's just, yeah, it's not a tough shot to make. But again, I haven't seen what scope is on that gun.
Right. And let's just say, if you were involved in a security detail operation overseas guarding a VIP and something like this happened, what would then happen to your unit? What would the consequences be for what appears to be a failure of epic proportions here?
Oh yeah, well, the people would be fired and it would be investigated. I mean, in the unit I used to be in,
right.
Under the current Canadian government, I don't know what would happen, but the way it should happen is people should be held accountable. But I actually think more important than that, I think this needs a big investigation. Like I don't know how all those systems work in the U.S. because I'm Canadian,
right?
But I think Donald Trump needs to beef up his security for the next 6 months, and when he's in, do a deep dive and tear apart everyone that was involved in that, because it doesn't add up.
I want to switch gears here, Dallas. Some of our audience.
All right, so I do have a clip where it described the type of optic on the rifle. It was a non-magnification, zero magnification type of thing. So it's the same type of situation as shooting iron sights at that distance, and you got to make a lollipop, and you took a little practice and you could do that. So I heard Alex Jones say that his 10-year-old could make that shot. I heard former special ops guy Tim Kennedy say likewise that any 10 or 11-year-old Cub Scout, Boy Scout type situation, they could make that shot. So it's not a complicated shot to get it started, but to get the evidence that we heard in those audio clips is much more complicated, because you can't move that gunman around hundreds of yards all at the same time, which means it's not a lone gunman, and it means that the authorities are not looking for anyone else, because they've already told everyone it's the Nicholas Katzenbach memo story of here's how the story goes, and there's nothing to see here beyond. And you don't need to go look for extra gunmen, because it was the lone gunman and he's dead now, so you don't even have to think about it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, the story's locked in stone, and then the fact that if we even bring up a second shooter, that's automatically going to be thrown in the conspiracy bin. Like, now it's already been solidified to this point. And so, until more evidence comes up, or even if there is more evidence that comes up, they can just sweep it away and just disregard it. Just say conspiracy theory. Nope, you're crazy. Or criminalize it. Or the other thing too that's been really shocking this last week is, well, okay, so they, we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's like the calls from now all the right, the like conservative people who just went through 4 years of censorship and deplatforming and getting your payment processors taken and ad revenue taken. Like, they're clamoring to have people on the other side now getting their ad revenue taken and stuff like that. And sure, it's like the Destiny guy, he's saying horrible shit, but it's like, didn't we just go through 4 years of getting our money taken, and now we're trying to like pull and complaining about it, and now we're trying to do the same thing for them? So anyway, but we're going to, potentially see anybody who questions this be the target of censorship and deplatforming and ad revenue taking and all that stuff too. But
yeah, I'm against that.
Yeah,
and I would say this, Stephen Bonnell, aka Destiny, has rarely said anything that I agree with. Yet I will continue to listen with an open mind. And I think he needs to have his platform. He doesn't need to be censored. He doesn't need to be deplatformed, because otherwise he'd be thinking that crazy stuff off in the corner and nobody would know about it. I think it's good that he goes on Piers Morgan and he said it like it was, even though he tried to do the same thing to Norman Finkelstein. And we could look that up in Clip Genie right now and go find that clip if we wanted to, or if you wanted to share it on social media, because I think it's it's a sign of disingenuousness that needs to be probably rooted out. So more on that in future weeks. But yeah, I think that was his Vosh moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So the further we deviate from the official narrative and as more evidence comes out, then that's when the censorship campaign gets launched, and who knows what else they're capable of. Because this is a big one. I mean, this is a big one.
It is.
It could be, it could be like kind of the yarn that kind of undoes the whole sweater in a way. I mean, it really could if
But
things
unlike
start to come
Danny
out.
Casolaro and others, Gary Webb, who might have pulled on those threads in the past, you've got hundreds or thousands of people, just like those people that just went into Bohemian Grove in numbers and got a bunch of video all at once. Like the New World Order is going to have to adapt and overcome because there's people out there making the game obsolete from their antiquated dinosaur Jurassic perspective. Like they made a plan for world domination back in the late 1800s. Bro, it's 2024 and the game is on and the jig is up because everybody knows about it now. And it's no longer like I have to explain to them for 8 hours. They're like, I get it. Now what's next? What do we need to do to outgrow this status quo? So I'm going to invite everybody here. Town Hall for Grand Theft World is this Tuesday night. It's going to be another spicy shindig. We're going to get together and have good conversation. If you didn't catch the Town Hall from 2 weeks ago, that was a really interesting episode in Town Hall history. They're not all like that. So appreciate that gem that was left as far as a trail of personal experience from somebody who was victimized by the dark occultists of the New World Order. Let's put it like that. That's the politest way to put it. And so I think we've done a good job of like getting this week's, it's just such a cornucopia of content, condensing it down, distilling it so you guys can have an understanding of what the world's being told, but also what evidence is available and what people are seeing kind of real time as they're figuring it out, parsing it, and sharing with each other. But I'm now looking at the clock, and I've been on the clock for 14 and a half hours. So I'm all set. Let's land this puppy. LD, who do we have to thank for tonight's episode, in addition to our wonderful Grand Theft World members that I'm going to see on Tuesday night?
Yeah. Thanks to the Grand Theft World community supporters. Real quick, just to tie up a loose end earlier.
Please do.
I was talking about the Clareton Sportsman's Club. So if you search for it, there are a number of outlets that were reporting Crooks had a membership at the Clareton Sportsman's Club. There's a range that had 200-yard rifle range. And just for reference, it was down on the south of Pittsburgh, downtown, just a little bit east, I think about a half-hour drive from Bethel Park, where Crooks lived, and the Keystone Shooting Center that came from that story about the guy that found him strange. That was up here north of Pittsburgh, slightly northwest, and you can see it's a bit southwest of Butler. And then I'll ask you after the show about the deer hunter. But
yeah, what did they film at that firing range? Because the deer in the deer
apparently
hunter is
nothing.
an elk from like Colorado or something.
Apparently the deer hunter is set in Clareton, but not actually filmed there, although it's not clear. Anyway.
Yeah, I can believe that. It's also set on like on the Pittsburgh steel mills, and I don't want to recount the whole movie from 1976, but these guys work at a steel mill, then they go to a wedding, and then they go hunting for the weekend, and it's one shot, one kill. There's this whole philosophy, and they mix in Vietnam flashbacks of MK Ultra type stuff that was going on. Anyway, deer hunter, it's a thing from 50 years ago you should know about. You might should know about it.
Yeah.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come